person's attitude rather than aptitude will determine their altitude. I used to hear that saying amongst people in places of authority, in jobs that I've worked at in the past, for people that run businesses that I know. And it seems to reflect a widely held belief amongst those that are successful, that ultimately a person's attitude will determine how successful they are rather than the skills that they have immediately. You can always teach a skill, but you cannot teach an attitude. I'm sure, you know, a lot of people can relate. You could have two different types of two people who face the same situation, the same environment, the same difficulties, right? And one person will be successful and the other one will fall flat in his face and fail. A lot of the time, it's the person's attitude that determines whether they're successful or not, versus the environment in which they find themselves. I can promise you, growing up, I genuinely believed that a person's environment determined the outcome in life. I was very much of the mindset, well, some people were born with money, some people were born into a loving, caring family, some people were, you know, just lucky. But here's the thing, the harder a person works, the luckier they get. You could have two window cleaners in identical parts of the country servicing identical types of customers, you know, on the same streets. They get up in the morning, they come downstairs, they open the front door, and they're confronted by the fact that it's raining. Let's say, for argument's sake, the one that turns around and says, "Today's not a good day to be cleaning windows today. I'm going to go back to bed where it's nice and warm." And then the other guy looks at it and goes, "I better take a coat today." You know, and he puts his coat on and he goes to work and he does his job and he earns his money, and then he comes home, you know, sort of thing, having earned a day's crust, what have you, and spends time with his family. He ultimately has chosen, he has identified the fact that the environment is not favourable in the current circumstances and has made changes to make things easier or more bearable, and gone out there and done it anyway. Which one of those two types of personalities do you think is going to be more successful? The person that, you know, looks at the environment and goes, "I don't fancy it, well, I don't like the conditions and blah, blah." And the other one that turns around and says, "Well, actually, you know, put a coat on, get amongst it." In the vast majority of circumstances, the person with that kind of attitude, the you know, let's just crack on kind of attitude, is the one that's more successful. And that's reflected in the fact that when I very first started my business, there were people who were more established than me, established longer than me, servicing customers on the same streets, etc., etc., etc. And in most other respects, they were exactly the same as I was, just more experienced and further down the line. Half of them are no longer around. And I think it's because of, they've looked at the environment, they've looked at they've looked at the circumstances surrounding what's going on and gone, "It's too much for me, this," and just backed out. Where other people like myself and others, I'm not alone in this, I'm not waving the flag for me, I'm by no means the only successful window cleaner around here. Where other, you know, the rest of us have sort of turned around and gone, "Right, well, you know, sleeves up, dig in, get amongst it. It ain't going to fix itself." And there's a lot to be said for someone with that kind of attitude. I think successful people have successful habits, you know, and oftentimes successful people will just muscle through and do what's necessary to succeed, no matter what comes their way. There are people that succeed when there are recessions on. There are people who grow businesses, small to large, okay? There are people who, like, I mean, look at bloody Lord Sugar. Lord Sugar, you know, was born on a council estate, you know, in East London. You know, there was no silver spoon in that guy's mouth. And he had a hard childhood and he grew up and he got amongst it and he made hard choices and he made sacrifices and he got up and he did the work and he had the attitude. And look at the guy now. The guy's one of the most successful people in the world. You're not going to sort of you know, turn round to the people who lived and grew up with Lord Sugar and say, well, you know, he got lucky. You know, the harder you work, the luckier you get. And just because you're in a minimum wage job does not mean necessarily that you'll stay there. But the one controlling factor in whether you succeed or not is not down to where you start, it's where you finish. Don't think for a minute that just because you were born with nothing means you're going to die with nothing. It might happen, but if it does happen, in the vast majority of cases, it's because you've accepted the situation. The thing is, you listen to people who have got lessons to teach like that, and say, "Oh well, you know, it is the situation that you're born into." Cobblers, oftentimes, it's what you make of the situation that determines whether you succeed or not. Imagine for a minute, you know, you were on a boat in the middle of the sea, no one's coming to help you, the waves are crashing, the wind's blowing, you think you're going to drown, you know, you're getting absolutely lashed by the wind and the waves and all this sort of stuff, and your tiny little boat is going to be consumed by the environment around you. Are you the sort of person that will curl up in a ball and allow the environment to consume you? Or are you the sort of person to grab the rope, turn the sail, manipulate the situation to your advantage, and and get yourself out of trouble? If you're the sort of person that curls up into a ball and allows the situation to dominate you, the situation is going to dominate you. But if you're the sort of person that grabs life by the bollocks and says, no more, and I don't care. And here's the thing, oftentimes you might grab life by the long and curlies, whatever, the short and curlies, and you might fail. But curling up in a ball is guaranteeing you're going to fail. You might as well go down swinging, in my eyes. What's the point in just allowing the situation to dominate you? I have many conversations with people who are in minimum wage jobs, and they want to pull themselves out of the situation that they're in, but they don't. Their attitude and the way they see the world around them, and they say, well, the situation isn't fair, and this isn't that, and blah blah. Yeah, but this, and yeah, but that. You give them a suggestion, and their response oftentimes is, yeah, but what? These people are often asking for advice. These people are looking for guidance. I get it. But then when people give them guidance, their response is, yeah, but nothing. Yeah, you need to accept the fact that you're in that environment. Absolutely. I'm not saying close your eyes to it. I'm not saying, batten down the hatches and close your blinkers and all that sort of stuff. I'm saying accept the fact that you're in a shit situation, but just don't choose to stay there. If you want something more for yourself, you have to go out there and earn it and get it. And you may fail. I failed. I've made some absolute clangers of mistakes. I borrowed money when I shouldn't have done, which set me up for failure down the line. When the recession hit, we lost virtually everything. Moving into my mother-in-law's house and all this sort of stuff. Yeah. And we were in a shit situation, but guess whose fault it was? It's mine. No one held a gun to my head and said, Chris, you've got to take the money. You've got to borrow the money that you know full well you can't afford. No one held a gun to my head. No one had my arm up my back. It's my fault. But oftentimes, whether you are successful or whether you are not successful is often down to how you perceive the situation around you and whether or not you're prepared to sort of take action and say, this far and no further. Your attitude, not your aptitude, will determine your altitude. Something to bear in mind.